Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome back to Jamie Photography. So, 32-bit HDR. Going to have a little bit of fun here. I'm going to take you through and show you how we can take two or three images and produce them into an HDR using Photoshop's 32-bit Pro HDR feature, and also using Adobe Camera Raw to help process that image. And then we'll bring it back into Lightroom to get where we are here. So this is Copenhagen. This is Nyhavn, which is the new harbour in Copenhagen. This is where most of the sort of outdoor eating areas are along the quaysides. Beautiful part of the world, very friendly, lovely people to go and visit. Certainly would recommend if you get a chance to go to Copenhagen. I'm going to take you through, show you how we process this image. If you do like the video as we go through, it'd be great for you to click like, and also welcome your comments and questions and any tips you might have down below. I do try to answer all of those. And if you haven't already subscribed, please feel free to join me here on YouTube. Also, if you've got 5 minutes, pop over and have a look at my website. The link's down below. It tells you a little bit about who I am, my gear, and some of the images that I've produced. And also, I've got a couple of sky packs if you're interested in purchasing them. I sell them at a very reasonable price if you do want to do some sky replacements. So this is the final processed image. I hope you like it. Where did we start? Well, we started with three images. This is the brightest one. So I was trying to shoot different levels of light. Of course, all of the highlights are overexposed, so therefore I shot, being an HDR, 3 stops under that. So there you can see that the highlights are much better. Still not very good. If you look up in the top corner there, you'll see the lights in the top of the roof there, still blown out. So what I also did was I did a third shot, another 3 stops down, to try to get down to where the lights were actually exposed. So we've got those 3 images, and I'm going to talk you through what we do with them. Okay, let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is just have a look at the 3 images I shot. So as you can see, this top one here is half a second, f5, ISO 1600. So that's quite bright, and we in fact we're a bit bright on the highlights with that one. That's the middle shot where the highlights are, we've exposed about right there for the highlights, and then we have a darker image as well, just to make sure that the brighter lights are not overexposed. So what we're going to do is just make some fine adjustments to these before we move on to look at the magic of going 32-bit. So I'm going to just take the brightest image here first. I'm going to go into our basic adjustments here and just bring the highlights right the way down, just so we can see that actually that works quite well. I'm just going to brighten the whole image up by 1 stop as well. So you can move the slider till you get 1, or you can just click on the box here and just type 1 in, enter, and that will give you the change in the exposure. I'm also going to open up the shadows, not all the way, probably to about +50. So again, you can just click on the blocks, type in 50 and return. So it's actually a pretty good image. There's a lot of dynamic range there already. So the Canon R5 gets you somewhere near 14 stops of dynamic range, which is pretty good. So we brought down those highlights, but you can see in areas up here it's burnt out. And in these areas here, it's also burnt out. So it's too bright. This image is too bright, but it does give us access to the shadows, as we can see along here. Quite a lot of detail there because it was the brightest image. So we've opened up the shadows. Not all the way, because I don't want to expose all the noise. We did shoot at ISO 1600. So looks pretty good in itself. What I'm going to do is going to carry these adjustments over. Just going to check my whites and blacks first as well. So I'm just going to hold down the Alt key, move the white slider. I can bring it up a little bit so there's a little bit of white showing. Go to the black, hold down the Alt key, and just bring it back. So there's a little bit of black in the shot there, so that's fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these settings that we've got here and apply them to the other 2 images. Now, I've shown you in a previous video that you can right click and you can go into develop settings and do Command or Control C for copy. That brings up the copy settings. Make sure you check all and then click copy, and then you can highlight the other 2. So click the first one, hold down the Shift key, click the second one, and then just press Control or Command V to paste those shots in there. So that's absolutely fine. So the middle one, as you can see, much darker now, with the highlights taken down. So we can actually bring those highlights up a little bit, not too far. We don't want to overexpose these areas here. but reasonably happy with that. And of course the bottom one here is very dark, so we can bring those highlights up. Again, we don't want to overexpose. I'm very cautious about these areas here. As you can see, now where you saw previously, now you can see there's actually a lantern up there in that window. Can you see? Whereas that was completely blown out. So I'm just going to take that down using the lantern as the guide. As you can see, I can see that lantern perfectly now. I'm just going to check my blacks and whites on this darkest image as well. So hold down the Alt key, and then you can see there's still a few whites there. So I'm just going to back them off a little bit, not too bright there. And then the blacks, I'm just going to, if we go too far to the left here, you can see that we're really getting too much black in there. So I'm going to go the other way. But that's the limit of the sensor. You can see there that the sensor cannot go any further. So those black areas are actually outside the range of the camera itself. So we're going to just set that there about plus 17. Let's just check that middle image. Do the same again with the blacks and whites. Hold down the Alt key for the white. Just back those whites back just a little bit so they're not too bright. Go into the blacks, and then same thing here. We are slightly underexposed on the blacks, so we can just go there to where we're just picking a little bit of black up there, about plus 16. So now we've got three images that give us our total dynamic range. We've got the 14 stops in the brightest image, this one here, and then we've got 14 in this one and 14 in this one. But of course, so if we actually add them all together, we actually get roughly between +2 and -2, maybe even 3 each way on the original 14. So that gives us about 18 to 20 stops of dynamic range when we combine them together in an HDR. Now, the normal route that you would do for an HDR in Lightroom is you'd select all three of these here, you'd right click on one of them, you'd go to photo merge and you'd click HDR. And I've just clicked that there, and I'll just show you what that does. And I'll actually produce this image so we can do a comparison slightly. So this is using Lightroom to do the HDR. The auto settings are on. There's a little bit of ghosting there because some people have been moving around. So we'll just leave that on low. We'll click merge, and it will bring those three images together. And what it will do is it will create for us a new file down the bottom. So it's just processing that. So here's the HDR. As you can see, it says at the top there, HDR. That's the image that we've produced using Lightroom. So a little bit of noise, we can correct that with denoise, but we can also now play around with the image. We can make it a little bit brighter, bring those highlights down a little bit more, and open up the shadows perhaps a little bit more. Getting quite a bit of noise down here, as you can see, but we'll try and correct that with denoise, because we can still do that because it's a DNG. So I'm just going to go down to denoise here. I'm going to select denoise, and I'm going to let it do its magic, and take about eight seconds to do that. And what it will do is it will apply the denoise algorithm to this image, and it should tidy up a lot of the noise, and it should look a lot better once done. So there we go, that's applied. There's a lot less noise. We can increase the amount of denoise effect here by moving the slider to the right and allow that to apply. There you go. Now there's little to no noise in there at all, but you lose just a little bit on the detail. But actually, that's a pretty good image. I'm quite happy with that. But let me show you the 32-bit. So we're going to go back to these three images, the three images we've got. So now I've selected those three images, as you can see. Before I take them over into Photoshop, what I'm going to do is I'm going to denoise them. Now you can select three. You can go to denoise, and you can just click denoise, and it will process them all. It processes one of them first and then applies the AI filter to the other two. So it's just doing that now, and once it's done that, it will now process the other two. So you get the timing again for the next two images. So it took 8 seconds for the first one. It will take roughly 15 seconds for the next two to do it. So we've done all three. I just want to zoom in and just have a look that it's not over processed. So let's just take the brightest image here. There we go. And let's just go down and look at the water. And let's actually make it a little bit brighter so we can really see what's going on. So yeah, a little bit of noise there, but it's done a pretty good job on each of these. But I'm just going to increase the denoise ever so slightly. Let's bring it up to probably 65. So there we go. And it will just reapply that to each of these images. Looking a little bit better, maybe a little bit more. Let's go up to 75. Yeah, that's looking really good now. So I'm just going to type 75 in that box there. So we'll just reprocess it. There we go. So all of them will have been done the same way. So let's just take that main bright image again, and let's just zoom back out, and let's put that back to 1 where we were on the exposure, just so we can see what's going on. So we've got the noise reduction in place on each of these 3. They're all highlighted. So now what we're going to do is going to do the 32-bit magic. We're going to right click and we're going to go to edit in. Now, rather than going to Adobe Photoshop at the top here, we go down the bottom and you'll find merge to HDR Pro in Photoshop. So I'll click on that, and what it's now going to do is load those 3 images into Photoshop. So you can see there's number 1, number 2. It's just going to load number 3 now, and then it's going to open the HDR Pro module. So we'll be able to see, here we go, what we're dealing with. Now, normally when you open this module, it starts in 16-bit. So that's where it goes, and you can make changes here. I've never been that successful. It does work quite well, but I find that Lightroom works better when you're just dealing with the raw data images at 16-bit. But what you do have in here is a 32-bit option, which you can select by that pull-down menu there. And you can see here that we're well within the histogram. There's nothing going off the ends. So this is looking pretty good. I'm going to click Remove Ghost, and that will highlight one of these images down the bottom here. And you can pick which one you prefer. If you look, I'm looking at the people here on the key side, and effectively I can choose which one I want. So I'm actually going to go with the one it's selected as well, which is the first one. So now that's selected, I've got my 32-bit selected. I'm going to go down here to Tone in Adobe Camera Raw, and I'm going to click that, and that's going to open the Camera Raw module within Photoshop. Okay, so it takes us back into Photoshop. Now load the module. There we go. We've gone into the Camera Raw filter, and these sliders and the functions are very similar to that that we have in Lightroom. And they work very much in the same way. There's 1 or 2 extra little things you can play with in here. Now, some people say, well, Jamie, why don't you just use Camera Raw for your images? Well, the truth is, because I have so many images that I'm dealing with, I can deal with them in Lightroom. And in Lightroom, it's a catalog, so I can apply the effects to 1 or more images at the same time. Whereas when you're in Photoshop, you're generally just dealing with the image that you're working with in Photoshop. So that's generally why I don't use it. But in this situation, it comes in really handy. So we're just going to go down to the sliders. So we've now got a 32-bit image. So it's going to be very much an average of all of those stops of dynamic range. So as we open up, let's just make it a little bit brighter here. So let's change that to +1. And you can see it's brightening up. We can go a bit brighter there still. Let's go up to maybe even +2. Let's go to +2. Let's bring down the highlights. Now, do you remember we were looking at the lantern up here and we couldn't see it in the brighter ones, but now we can see it. I can bring the highlights right the way down, and as you can see, we can see what's going on up there. In fact, we can make the whole scene even brighter still, so we can even bring it up to +3 stops. So I'm just going to type in there 3. As you can see, we are not overexposing on any of these. It's looking pretty good, actually. We will bring down the whites a little bit, just where we're really bright on these areas here. We can just get the white slider and just bring that down just a little bit more. There we go. That works very well. And then what I'm going to do is open up the shadows, and this time I'm going to open them up all the way. Now you see that there's a lack of contrast, and so it's gone into a sort of haze. We can add that contrast back. Bear in mind, it is 32-bit, so we have that 18 to 20 stops of dynamic range. So I'm just going to bring the contrast slider over to bring the image back to where I think it looks nice. So there, +60, that looks pretty good indeed. So just going to pop down, have a look at the water. Smooth as ice look, no noise in there whatsoever. Same with the sky, little tiny bit in the clouds, but it's pretty good actually. So that's looking okay. Maybe I can add in even more, maybe go to 80 on the contrast just to make that pop right. Now we just need to tidy this scene up. So there's some things I want to make a little bit brighter, some things I want to make a little bit darker, and I just want to affect the colors slightly. So what we're going to do whilst we're in here is we can go into masks. They're up here in the table on the side here, And much like we do in Lightroom, we can use the same sort of gradient. So I'm taking a linear gradient here, and I'm just going to bring it quite a narrow one and just run it along the key side there. So I'm just going to come up just slightly above the key side. There we go. And it's quite a narrow one. So everything this side of the red dot's going to be a 100% effect, and everything that side of the white dot's going to be no effect. So that's where the gradient will be applied across that gap. So we're going to brighten up the water a bit more. Okay, so I'm just going to brighten that up a little bit more. I'm going to add a bit more blue into there. So I'm going to go down to the temperature slider and just add a little bit more blue in there, not too much. And it's probably just a bit too bright. Just bring that back just a little bit and bring up the contrast. So we've got that water sort of still a bit bright, so just backing it off a little bit more. We don't want it brighter than the sky. That's really important there. About 0.55, that gets us where we want to go. We're going to add in just a little bit more contrast into the water there. So we've got a lot of detail in there. And what I like the buildings. The buildings look really nice. The sky we're just going to darken a little bit. So we're just going to take another, create another mask. This time we're going to take a linear gradient, the same again. I'm just going to bring it down in the sky like this over the top there. And we're just going to bring that down, go to the exposure slider and just darken that down in the top left corner there. And just a tiny bit of blue added to that. So we get the color contrast between the two main areas. I'm going to jump back to this one because I think this is still a little bit bright. So I'm going to go back to mask 1 and I'm just going to add a little bit more contrast in there and just take a little bit out of the brightness. So that looks about right. Yeah, I think 0.5 works. So this area where the buildings are, particularly along the front here where all the restaurants are, is a little bit bright. We maybe want to make that pop a little bit more, maybe with a little bit more in the way of clarity. So I'm just going to take another mask, and this time I'm going to take a brush. Now I'm going to show you something really, really good here. I'm going to take this brush, and what I'm going to do is, it's quite big as you can see. So it goes below the key there and above the top of the sort of covered eating area. So I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller so it fits in there. And at this end, I'm basically just going to go to the very end here and I'm going to click once. Now I'm going to hold down, well, before I do, I'm just going to take the flow to 100% so we get a full coverage. I'm going to go to the other end, but this time I'm going to make it smaller. So using the square brackets to the left of the return key, I'm just going to make it smaller so that it actually covers the same area just above the top of the covered eating areas and the side of the key. There we go. And now what I'm going to do is going to hold down the shift key and click. And what I've done is now applied a large mask at this end that narrows as it goes all the way down to that area there. Can you see that? So if I removed the feather when I did it, you'll have seen it much more clearly. But I had a big feather because I want to feather out from the main area. So we now have a mask that we can deal with. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is go down to the highlights and just bring the highlights down just a little bit more. There we go. That looks nice. And then I'm going to go down to clarity and I'm going to add some clarity in. So just adding a little bit of clarity. Now, if you do add clarity in, it does make it pop really well, but it also brightens the scene slightly. So I've gone plus 32 there. I'm going to add a little bit of texture into that area there, plus 3. I'm going to go back up. And what I'm going to do is just bring those highlights down just a little bit further. Now, what I also notice is there is a predominant color, sort of green and yellow in here. So what I'm going to do is just add in a little bit of magenta into this brush just to compensate. So it gets a little bit more golden along here. Okay, so that's looking really good. Now, I'm going to show you a really good trick. We're going to go into point color. So you go down to point color. So don't worry about the mask for now. We're going to go down to point color. We're going to select the little eyedropper in point color, and we're going to pick one of the colors of the buildings because I want to create a greater difference between the colors, right? So let's go and pick this orange on this building here. So it's selected the orange, and now we've got some sliders here that we can deal with. Now, one of my favorites is this early access slider called variance, and there's a separate video, welcome to go back and see it, that explains exactly how this works. But basically, if you go to the left, all the colors similar to orange become orange. So let me slide that all the way to the left so you can see everything, including the key sides, gone to orange. It all matches the color of the building. If I slide it the other way, all the way, now you get the biggest difference between oranges and the other colors. Yeah, the orange that I picked. And so the greens come back, so you can see that. So we were in the middle. So we just want to move that a little bit to the right. There we go. So the greens come back again. It's a bit prominent, okay? But it's not a problem because we take another eyedropper, take the eyedropper, put it on the green, select the yellowy green that we've got there. Now we can play with the the variance slider again, but it doesn't really help us a great deal at this stage. Okay, so what we're going to do this time now is we can actually use the hue to actually change the color of the green slightly more towards an orange or a yellow just by moving it to the left. We can change the saturation and luminance levels. So I'm just going to drop the luminance down just a little bit along there and just bring up the saturation just a little bit, not very much, about +1, +2. So now we've got a really good variety of colors, and that is really what the place looks like. You know, Nyhavn in Copenhagen is a wonderful place, this new harbour that's in the city centre with a lot of the eating areas. It really is, it is quite nice. So it's a good place to visit, but it still doesn't look completely natural. So what we're going to do is we're going to make some changes, minor changes in Lightroom when we go back into Lightroom just to finish this image off. So I'm happy with where we are here. So I'm just going to click OK. It's going to process that image, and there it is now in Photoshop. So now's the time if you want to tidy up, remove anything that you don't like with the remove tool or with generative fill. You can do that here now. Without too much trouble. So I mean, I could just pop over here, take the remove tool, and maybe I don't want this cable, this pipe coming along here. It's a little bit distracting where that is, so I'm just gonna run that along and just take that out. There we go. I'm going to hit the check mark to apply it. So it's the first time it's run the remove tool since doing that, so it has to process the whole image first. But there you go. It's removed that. That looks a lot better. To be all honest, there's not a great deal else I'd like to change on this. I'm quite happy with this image. So I'm just going to send this back into Lightroom. So I'm going to go to File, Close, and I'm going to say Save. And then I'm going to go back into Lightroom, and we've got the image back here, right? So let's make some minor adjustments whilst we're here. Just going to go down to the color mixer, and we can just look at a number of things here, the saturation levels and the different sort of lighting levels. So the red's really bright. So let's go into luminance here, and let's just drop the reds back slightly. There we go, especially that sign. That sign looks better now. So that's before and that's after. So that looks a bit better. And let's just bring the yellows down just a little bit, not too much, probably just about 6 there. The greens definitely need to be a little bit less bright because they're all under the lights, so we're going to bring them back quite a bit. So this is the luminance slider. We're not changing any of the colors. The blue in the sky, we can make that, and the water, we can make that a bit brighter. I'm going to go +50, and I'm just going to add a little bit to purple and magenta. So that makes the colors pop well. They'll go back into saturation now on the sliders, and we can choose how much color we actually want from each of these. So the reds look pretty good. I don't think we need to add any more, so I'm not going to really change that very much. Orange, a little bit more orange to the scene, probably about +8. Yellow, I'm just going to reduce a little bit, about -20. Greens, let's boost the greens. Green always looks great, so let's just put some more green color into the scene. And we'll just a little bit of blue, not too much. And the magentas and the purples, you can see the lights down here, so let's just give them a little bit. That will just make them pop in the distance. So that's looking really good. Now, the final bits I want to do with this particular image, there's still a degree of contrast we need to sort out, not so much on the buildings, but certainly on the sky and the water. So what I'm going to do is just grab a mask here. I'm going to select the sky, so it'll automatically select the sky for us. I'm going to go to the 3 dots on the sky. I'm going to right click on that, and I'm going to intersect it with the sky again. So watch the roof there. You get a slightly better mask if you do that. So that works really well. So a bit more contrast in the sky. And I'm definitely going to add some clarity to the sky. We'll brighten it up a little bit, but make the clouds really visible. You can see that this deer sign on top of this house now, that works really well. Now we do the same with the water, but of course we don't have a water selection. So what we can do is to use the landscape selector and see whether it will give us a water option. So it's just working out there, detecting it's got a water box. So let's tick that. Well, there you go. We've got a water checkbox. So let's create a mask for the water. And now what we can do is the same thing. We can add a little bit more contrast to the water. And I'm going to add a little, just to see what happens if we add in some clarity there. That works quite well, actually. It gives a nice reflection here. And in fact, I'm going to brighten this, but I'll darken this in a second. So let's just brighten this so we get this area here looking a bit brighter. So go to the exposure slider, just brighten that up. That looks nice. Then I'm going to take another mask with a brush. This brush is going to be quite a large brush. So make a big brush like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add contrast and a little bit of clarity to this brush. And what we're going to do is just come in here where we've got just a little bit too much in the way of sort of the light. It's not really, it's almost sort of a bit misty. So we can just come in there and just bring that back a little bit there, down the side, and across this side here. There we go. That looks nice, and I'm not going to keep going with this. I think this image is looking really good. I'm just going to make it a little color adjustment. There's a really nice little trick you can do. It gives the image a little bit of a vintage look, and that is to drop your saturation down by about 20 points. Okay, and then it loses its saturation, of course. But what we can then do is take the vibrance and go up about 40 points. And what you do is you get a really lovely balance between the two colors. So just to finish off, let's just look at overall, do we need a little bit more opening of the shadows? Yep. The highlights look about right. Just going to brighten the whole scene ever so slightly. Yeah, I'm going to come up about plus 25. No, let's go plus 25, yeah. And then I'm just going to bring the highlights back down to make it work so that we're back where we were. Even going to go a bit brighter. Let's go plus 0.4. And just bring those highlights down again just to make it balance off. And I'm just going to add a little bit of contrast to the whole scene again. Lots of contrast being added here, but because we had that 32-bit file, of course everything was very flat, so we had to build that all back in. I am going to say I like that. Yeah, probably about there, plus 14. And you know what, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to say that's actually a good shot. Now remember where we started from. So where did we start? This was one of our original images. This was our brightest original image. This one here was our brightest. We'd made some adjustments to that. Let me just reset that. So that's where we were when we started. And we've done a lot of adjustments here. We've made it really work well. That was the one that we created using the HDR. Worked pretty good. We could have done some color balancing on that. I think that would have worked quite well. Really good in the way of noise levels, as you can see. Hardly any noise in there at all. And then this is the 32-bit that we've come in, put that extra contrast in, really sort of pulled the image together. And look how sharp that is with no noise at all. So there's a couple of ways there you can do this. I think that works quite well. So here's our finished image. Just going to make that full screen. Yeah, I'm really happy with that. Yeah, that's 32-bit processing. I'm going to show you in another video coming up shortly how we can use that 32-bit processing to also help us create some really, really, really beautiful black and whites. So look out for that in my next video. I'm going to take you through how that 32-bit color contrast can allow you to do some work there. And if you like the video, it'd be great for you to click like, and I always welcome your comments and questions and any tips that you might have down below. I do my best to answer all of them. And if you haven't already subscribed, please feel free to join me here on YouTube. But for now, I'm going to say bye-bye.